I'm John Mark Stroud.
And you told me about some of the ventures that you are involved in and have been involved in.
Sure. Currently, I'm in the process of opening a new business, an AMCO transmission and automotive repair franchise with a partner, Ben Van Camp. I'm also a commercial real estate broker and do some small business and franchise consulting, little opportunities on the side.
You formerly owned Fast Signs here in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, I owned the Fast Signs franchise here in Asheville. During that 12-year span that we owned that, we also purchased and owned the Fast Signs in Johnson City, Tennessee for about 2 years in the middle of that.
Very good. And can you tell me about your background before you opened Fast Signs here in Asheville?
Glad to. I'm a native of Western North Carolina. Grew up at Lake Junaluska, which is just west of Asheville. I'm a graduate of Western Carolina University. My intention was to get through school really, really quickly, which I did. I then got in the hospitality industry, started as an intern at Grove Park, and subsequently went to work for Marriott Corporation. Worked for Marriott for about 8 years. In my last capacity, I was a general manager in their Courtyard by Marriott division.
Okay. And what in your personality, or what made you decide to open your own business?
Well, every day when I put my suit and tie on at Marriott, it felt like I was putting a noose around my neck. I just always knew it was a great experience, and I probably would not have been as successful an entrepreneur had I not had the great training and experience I got at Marriott. But I always knew I didn't like having to toe the corporate line when the corporate line just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. Didn't feel like it was the right way to take care of people, or they weren't using the right criteria to make decisions. I always had a lot of self-confidence that, I could make my own way and I could do it better.
So what is it about that environment, or an environment that you wanted to create for, let's say, you and your employees?
Sure. Well, for me, I wanted to create an environment where the employees were part and parcel of the business. They weren't a commodity that you hired and used as you needed and then disposed of when you were done with. To me, I wanted to treat those people like the human beings that they are and provide opportunities for them. And fortunately, I had great success. I had very little turnover in the 12 years that we owned our Fast Signs. Most of those folks that were the key folks were with me 8 to 10 years during that time. So I think people appreciate being respected, and they appreciate being taken care of, and they appreciate being more than just an employee that you come and expect to punch the clock. Giving the people that work for you the empowerment to make decisions and to be reasonable, then they can interact with those people on their own style. They don't have to be stiff. They don't have to use the company script. If you teach them the right things and you teach them the reasons why we're doing stuff, people inherently will do the right thing. They want to do the right thing. And that allowed us to deliver long-term, very great customer service.
Well, and you had a lot of success with Fast Signs as well. Can you tell me about some of those successes, whether they're tangible or even just some of the, personal success you got from that?
Well, we were very fortunate in running that business. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, timing's important, lots of things are important. But we ran that business, I owned that business for 12 years. We managed to go double-digit growth for 12 years, which is hard to do. I mean, it's easy in the first 1 or 2. When you go from nothing, it's easy to double. But when you get up well over $1 million, $2 million, it gets harder to do double-digit growth. And we were able to do that. So that was certainly very rewarding. One of the other things that was really important to me, I mentioned the key employees that we had.
Yes.
Every one of those key employees, when they worked for me, bought a house while they were working for us. So it was really great to be part of their achieving the American dream. We had some really unique benefits. If somebody had a baby, we would start a college fund for them and put $1,000 in a college fund. They just had to agree to some kind of payroll deduction. It could be $5, it could be $100, whatever, as long as they would start doing that. We also would give them $1,000 to take to the closing table if they bought their house. So it was the kind of things, those were really rewarding, to be able to see those people grow and see them have security in their lives in a way that they had never had before. On a community level, our business was very high profile. It gave me an opportunity to participate in a lot of community activities. The primary one being at the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce, where I was the chairman of the Asheville Chamber 4 or 5 years ago, and that was really rewarding to stand up there as a small business guy, pretty small one at that point. Maybe I had 10 or 12 employees, and be able to represent the 2,000 member companies of our chamber. That's a great opportunity. I mean, you can't buy that kind of advertising, you can't buy that kind of exposure, but it comes with a lot of responsibility.
Yes, definitely. So is there anything during that time that really stands out that you would have done differently now that you look back on it?
When I sold the business, I wish I'd have sold it to the employees, and I didn't. It had gotten to the point where they couldn't have afforded it.
Yes.
But I didn't really even give them an opportunity to try, which in retrospect, I wish I'd done. I just sold it to somebody else who was able to purchase it. And, when I had the kind of relationship with them that I mentioned to earlier, that was a pretty painful thing for them and for me.
When did you know that it was time to sell Fast Signs? I understand because you had so much success with it, and you created almost a family, I guess, extended family with your employees. So when did you know when to let it go? Well,
in the last 3 years of the business, I was very fortunate. I got to the point where the business didn't really need me anymore. And one of the important things for an entrepreneur to do when you start a business, you're clearly in the business. But there's a point that you need to transition to working on the business and not in the business. And by that I mean you don't need to be the guy turning the key. You need to still know what goes on and have intimate knowledge of the business, but you need to be working on growing the business and being outside of the business, not so much inside. And I had gotten to that point probably in year 5 or 6, and that's one of the things that gave me time to do this chamber thing and lots of the other community work that I did. But in the last 3 years, it had gotten to the point where, I was only going in a couple hours twice a day, and even then the employees would say, "What are you doing here? We got it. We don't, So I realized that at that point, I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate success, that you've created a business that'll do that. But I found that I was bored. I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't the caretaker kind of owner, meaning just let it run and take the profits out and occasionally show up. That just didn't really fit well for me. We sold it in 2008, or actually November of 2007, and there were a lot of things that were starting to look to me like, I think something's coming. And I can say that in retrospect. Back then I could have given you a list of pros and cons, and recession would not have been written on the list.
Certainly. But
having grown double digits for 12 years, just something. I had some intuition that the time was right to move on, sell that business, and take some time off and kind of regroup and decide what's going to come next. Fortunately, we had a franchise, but we grew our franchise to be 4 or 5 times the size of the average Fast Sign. So I had to become that inventor, if you will, of the system, because Fast Signs didn't have a system. We were the second largest Fast Signs in the entire world, and they didn't know how to support us because they were concerned about 400, not 1 or 2 that were really, really successful. So we were constantly we were having to reinvent the business as we went along. And we did an awful lot of that. How do we do this in such a way that, okay, here's how it's going to be, here's a piece of it, now I can let that go and put that in somebody else's hands. So that's a great book, and many entrepreneurs need to read that because they need to know whether they're the technician or they're the operator or whatever I can't remember the third one off the top of my head, but so that they understand, so that they don't get stuck in their comfort zone. And inevitably, if you're just one of those 3 components that every small business has to have, you're going to fail.